Hey there and welcome back. So this video is going to be something a little bit different in that I had a customer reach out to me and say they were trying to figure out a way to access the data that this particular website was giving up, but the data looked like it was in a weird format. So they sent me a sample of the format of the data. I took a look at it and went, yeah, that's pretty weird. I don't know what that is. So I thought it might be a good time to just turn the camera on or the screen recording, flip on the mic, and you can watch me as I go through some more advanced techniques when looking at websites and how they pass information around. And it's not just kind of reading HTML, but how do we actually dig into the data and what are some of the tricks and tips we can use. Now, the client ideally wants a Python script to read this data in for them. So we'll cover some of that as well, although that might be beyond what some of you want to see. That'll be more towards the end of the video as I begin to hopefully figure out how this website's smashing data around. And this is unscripted, so we're just going to kind of dig in. Hopefully it doesn't take too long, although if you've watched other videos of mine, I get stuck relatively easily. So this is the website, Localiza to do. I have no idea. That's Spanish or if it's Portuguese or something. I'm not sure. But this is the website, and it's got a bunch of ships and airplanes, and I'm not sure where it's pulling this data in from, but that's kind of the idea behind this site. So the first thing I want to do is actually open Google Chrome Developer Tools. So I'm on a Mac. So I'll go up to the top and I'll go to View, Developer. This is going to be chopped off in the video because I'm only recording a portion of the screen. But if you go to View, your last option is Developer and go to Developer Tools. Or in your little hamburger menu over here on the right-hand side, same thing. It's going to be chopped off, but there's a More Tools option that you can hover over and go down to Developer Tools. All right. So this is Developer Tools. If you've never used it before, this is a great primer. This is how we can actually see what's going on behind a website. We can inspect the page source, all kinds of other great stuff. Now, the interesting thing here is that we have the Network tab open. So the Network tab is telling us what stuff our browser is loading into the current page. So I'm just going to refresh the page so you can see what that all looks like. So we're bringing in scripts and style sheets and images and all kinds of stuff. Now, what the customer was looking for was a particular endpoint that was providing the location data for ships. And you'll see I actually previously already had this, but what I want to select is XHR, which are basically, think of them as little requests that your browser will do to continually receive real-time data from a website. So you don't see this going on in the background. You're not clicking a link or doing anything like that. But it is doing this work in the background. And the endpoint that he was actually interested in is this one, this services, ships, and then list.ashx v equals 3, so likely version 3. So we can see that there's actually a few other, there's flights, devices, so there's some other interesting stuff there, but he was only interested in ships. So I'm just going to click on it. And this is the kind of drilling down into the network view of a particular request. So we can see where did we request it from. We'll want to keep that for our Python script. So I'm actually just going to copy that now just for the fun of it. I'm going to go to Wing. I'm going to say URL is this. That's the one he wanted. We'll go back. Okay, cool. So it'll tell you some other things about what kind of data was passed back and forth, what the request looked like. So in this case, we only had one query string parameter, which was v, and it was set to 3. And let's look at the response. So this looks very similar to what he had sent me. It's kind of gobbledygook. We do see some what appears to be strings. So we can see USS Martha here, which I'm assuming is a military ship, a Navy ship for the US, I'm guessing. So we do see some data in here, but the rest of it's kind of gobbledygook, and we don't really know what format it's in. So the next thing we want to do is figure out, okay, who is requesting this? What JavaScript is actually requesting this stuff? And then maybe we can figure out how they're processing this data in JavaScript. So what I'll do is I'll go over to this column and I can see initiator. So this is the script there that's doing the work of requesting that particular URL. So that's cool. I'm going to click on that. and that will open up the sources tab. So now we're in sources, and we see that there's a whole bunch of JavaScript here. And it's the file name is localiza todo-2.0.min.js. So .min means that it's been minified, meaning it's been squashed down to save space. It could also mean that it has additionally been obfuscated, so it's not entirely easy to read, but we'll learn more as we go here. So there's this cool little button here that's pretty print. And what that'll do is like expand that code, so now we can actually see some of this stuff that's in here. So you can see this is much easier to read for me. I'm just kind of scrolling around. But now what we need to do is we need to figure out, well, out of all these, it looks like there's like 10,000 lines of code here, 9,000. There's a lot. We are not going to scroll through this manually or use Control F to figure out where that particular call to that endpoint is. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the network tab. I'm going to right click on that URL, and I'm going to say copy link address. Now back in the sources tab over here on the right hand side, we have xhr/fetch breakpoints, and this is exactly what we want to do. We want to add a breakpoint here when the URL contains, and I'm just going to strip off the first part, when the URL contains, if let's just try that again. All right, so I'm just saying, hey, I want you to stop when we send an XHR with this service s ships list URL in the request. So there we go. Okay, cool. So I didn't have to, I was about to actually like move the map around or do something to trigger that request, but already we've got a breakpoint hit. So let's just take a look at what we got here. So an XML HTTP request, something you can go read up on in JavaScript. This is how your browser will send these requests out. So that's what it's called. It's an XML HTTP request. And so I'm just seeing down here is the send. This is exactly at the point, at the moment before it goes and issues that request. We've actually stopped, which is great. So what we can do is look up here. So r.onload. So r is the variable that contains our XML HTTP request. And up here, the onload is what's going to happen after the request is sent and the response comes back. So this is exactly what we want to do, is we want to figure out, okay, what happens after we get the response back from that endpoint. So I'm just going to go over here and click this little play button, which will resume execution. So it sent the request off. All right, I was getting a little worried because nothing was happening. So now we've got a fresh breakpoint here. So it's checking the status code. This is the HTTP status code. So if it's a 200, that's good. So this, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to step line by line. So there's the notion of step over and step in. So you'll see me step over. And what step over does is if a function's about to be called, it'll just walk over top of that function call. If you go step in, we're actually going to jump into the function to see what code is there. So you'll see me selectively choosing, do I want to actually step over or step in? This is just kind of years of debugging work in a former life, reverse engineering code on Windows and Mac OS X. So this is something you'll learn, that sometimes you'll want to step in, sometimes you'll want to step over. So let's just keep going here. So step over. So here we're defining a uint8 array. Now I don't actually know what the proper definition of that would be, but I'm guessing what it's creating is this big list of the bytes from the response from the server. So the response here is the raw response from the server, all that gobbledygook. So, and that's a technical term, gobbledygook. So I'm just going to step over because I'm not interested in how internally JavaScript does this. If I did step in, we could go down a rabbit hole and never come back out. So I'm going to step over. All right, so now we have n should be the variable that contains the response. So down in the console at the bottom, I can type n and hit enter, and sure enough. So it's uint array 5. So there's only 5 little chunks in there. So that's not very long. That is much shorter than it should be, because when we looked at the response, it was quite large. So I'm actually just going to hit play. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a breakpoint down here, skipping over this status thing, so that we can get a little further. All right, now let's look at n again. N. All right, so 8,733 bytes. That's the length of this array here that it's telling me. That is probably more accurate. And what we're seeing here is this T bracket bracket is a function. I actually don't know what the beginning part of this JavaScript is doing. I'm not a JavaScript coder. I can muck around with it. But what's more interesting to me is this function call here, tn. So T is not a, we can't tell what function it is, but I do want to step in at this point because I don't know what that function is. So I'm going to go step in. Okay, so that dropped us down to here, which is a fresh function. We see that T in this case is actually our array from the server, so that's cool. So let's just step onward here. Okay, so it's saying if v is less than 1 plus something, something, blah, 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 invalid data received. All right, well, I'm going to step over that. So if c equals t0, so t0 is 1. Interesting. So I wonder what that is. So it's a response version. So that's interesting because here we sent version 3 in the URL, but it looks like we got version 1 back. Okay. Well, I wonder if there isn't some other URL that was sent. So I'm just going to set a breakpoint there. And I'm going to run it again just to see when we land here, because I usually, if you set a version in the query string, you're going to see that version reflected back, because I'm guessing because of this unsupported response version, that's what it's looking for there. Interesting. So I'm going to play it again. Let's go T0 again. Okay, so that's version 3. So it might be that it's actually reaching out to other endpoints. So let's just flip over to the network tab real quick. Yeah, so it's actually picking up. It looks like it's picking up. Oh, maybe it's because services ships has another URL here that's sharers.ashx with a v equals 1, which is version 1. Interesting. Okay, cool. So I think now I'm just going to look at our breakpoint. URL contains services ships list. I wonder why that would be. Interesting. Okay, so I'm not going to get too lost in that, but I'm guessing that now that we have T0, which is the very first member of our array, is set to 3, that we actually have the right response. So the other thing I'll do is I'll actually make a note in the Python now. So I'm going to want to try to describe this data structure in some way, and I just use these little notations. So we know that at byte 0, maybe I'll just 1 2 3 4, we're gonna say this is version. Okay, so all I'm doing here is kind of making note of how this data is structured so that when I'm writing the Python code, it's easier for me to reference and remember what pieces I might want to look at, or just kind of create a bit of a working document for me to understand what this data is all about. So we have this little check. I'm going to step over this. And now we have a new stream reader. So I'm guessing a stream reader is just a way for us to read into this array in a way that's like almost like reading into a file, is my guess. So we're passing in the array and the number 1, which I don't know what that means. I could Google it. Okay, cool. So H is now set to our stream reader and cursor is at 1. So that means the cursor is actually set to 1 byte into that array. So it's just skipping over the version is what it's doing here, because T0 is the version, that's 3, and then it's just saying, hey, I want you to start reading at 1. Okay, so arrays are 0 index, meaning you can see here T0 is the first element, T1 is the second. All right, so let's step over. Okay, read D word. All right, so that's actually a term. A D word is a double word. What that means is 4 bytes. So we're going to read 4 bytes out of the stream that we passed in. So I don't know what those 4 bytes are going to be, but it looks like it's going to be assigned to L, the L variable here. So let's just skip over that. So L now equals 152744005. Now that to me looks like a Unix timestamp. That's what it looks like. So I'm going to go L. That's what that looks like. I'm just going to switch to the network tab. Yeah, so often what you'll see in some services is they'll use a TS parameter. In this case, it's MTS. I don't know what the M part means, but TS usually means timestamp. So it's ask for a certain set of data within this time range, or just passing in the current timestamp to the server when you make the request. So my guess is this is an actual timestamp. We can confirm this. I'll just switch to Google and go Unix timestamp. You can see I have Googled this more than once because I can't do a timestamp conversion in my head clearly. So I'm just pasting it in here. I'm going to hit enter. Right. So it is. This is the current GMT time zone. So we know that the first D word, the first four, or sorry, after the version number, the next D word, the next 4 bytes is actually a timestamp. So what I'll do now is I'll go 1 to 5 is a timestamp. I'll just make a D word here. All right. Okay. So we still don't know a lot, but we know it's read a timestamp out. That's the first chunk of that gobbledygook binary that we saw before. All right, so let's step over. Okay. So now we are in here, and I see this another function call. So as soon as I see kind of those round brackets, and it's just the letter F, so I have no idea what this function's called, I'm likely going to want to step into it because I know this is not a standard JavaScript kind of function call. This is something that the developers have created. So I'm going to go step in. Ah, look at that. So we see ship item from stream. So my guess is they have a cool, actually this probably, you can see this is where they built the URL, and then it kind of sends off that XHR request, and then here we're actually in the callback, it looks like, after that function's executed. Cool, so we can go ship item from, I'm going to put a breakpoint here just so I don't lose this code. So cool, ship item from stream. Let's step into that because that sounds really promising. All right, var I equals new E. I don't know what E is, and I don't care. I'm going to step over, and then I dot read. So let's step into read. Okay, cool. So if I equals 1, what is I equal to? 3. Okay, so this is the version string. So if I equals 1, it's going to execute all that code. If I equals 2, it's going to execute that. And if I equals 3, it's going to do all of this, which looks exactly like how it's reading all of the data in. Cool. Okay, so the MMSI, I know this is a term used for, and I can't remember what it actually means. AIS type, I believe that's like the type of ships or planes. And then we can see here the location, latitude, longitude. I don't know what Mercator is. I'm sorry, Mercator. I apologize for my ignorance. Speed and timestamp. Cool. Course and heading. All right, so set MMSI. I'm just scrolling down here reading this code. Set MMSI is child ship, coast station, the AIS type. Oh yeah, search and rescue plane, search and rescue helicopter, fisher, tugboat, sailboat, lighthouse, passenger, merchant, tanker. Cool. All right, so that looks really promising. But these variables are not named in a very nice way. So we're going to have to just step through this, all of these reads, to figure out what they're actually doing with it. Now, to walk backwards a little bit, the original request was just to get the ship names and latitude, longitude out. So that's what we'll focus on. But I have a feeling that this data is kind of packed in this way that is in a very specific kind of layout. So all of these read D word, read string, read byte, this means that the data is going to be laid out in a certain way that we're going to have to obey if we want to be able to loop over it and read it. So read D word, I'm going to step over. All right, so here's what we got. We've got H is 5. I have no idea what that actually means. So if we type H here, 5. Okay, so I'm going to start making some notes here. So this is, and then what I think is for a ship, we have, I'm going to start using this notation. So we have a D word, which is unknown because I don't know what that is. D word, which is unknown. O, which is timestamp. It looks like another timestamp. So I'm going to go, the next D word is a timestamp. And read string. So this dot name, oh, I wonder if this is the ship name. So this dot name. So I'm just in the console, port -5. So I don't know if that's what that is, but it looks promising to me. Although read string can mean a few different things. So I'm going to set a breakpoint there because we're going to want to come back to this. So we're going to have a string, and this is going to be ship name. We'll call it a ship. I don't know if it's for ships or for everything or what. Maybe vessel is a better idea. I don't know. And then we have, I have no idea. It's a byte. Byte. Unknown. Okay, we're here at C, R. So we saw R down here, which is latitude. So the next D word is latitude, and then it's divided by 1 followed by 6 zeros, so 1,000,000. So I'm going to go, and then U is longitude, it looks like, yes, because we can see longitude down there. So I'm going to go D word, latitude divided by 1,000,000. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And the next D word is longitude divided by 1,000,000. There's probably a real fancy reason for that, but I don't know why they're dividing by 1,000,000. So that's that. We've got R and U. S is a short, so that's half the size of a D word. So 1, 2, 3 shorts in a row, and I don't know what any of them mean. So I'm gonna just go short. Unknown, and there's 3 of them in a row. And again, as an additional challenge, you could actually work through the rest of this code to figure out what some of these mean. And then we have a length, which is another short. So they actually have named that variable. So I'm going to go short length. Okay. And then we have a byte at the end. What is the nav status? I don't know what that means. Oh, there probably is some sort of status codes, maybe like what it's up to currently, maybe. So the length was the short. Now we have to read another byte at the end. So we're gonna go byte unknown, because I actually don't know what that is. Okay, and then data version error. And then we set the MMSI, the AIS type. So again, you could go down and continue reverse engineering some of this to figure out how you can convert this to Python if you wanted to. We're not interested in that. We just want the ship and the longitude and latitude. Okay, set the AIS. Okay. All right. So there, and then there's a location object. And then what we can do actually is we can just step over that. We'll step over that. We'll step over that. And that, and that, and that. So it's about to return right here at this curly bracket. And so we can go this, which is our ship object, it looks like. And if we want to dump it out to something readable, we can go json.stringify this. And let's see what happens. Oh yeah, cool. So we have the name is port 5, raw ship class, location, data. Okay, speed, timestamp, and the course. So in an ideal world, I'd love to be able to just dump this JSON out. I know there's some hacks you can do to try to get your code loaded locally into your browser to do this. I'm not going to do that because I don't know how. I just know it's possible. So at this point, if we scroll back up, I had this breakpoint set. We don't know how they deal with strings. It could mean that they just start reading at that particular offset, and then they read until they encounter a null byte, but I'm not entirely sure. So I'm just going to run this again. Okay, so our first breakpoint gets hit. This is where I set a breakpoint on ship item from stream. Let's run it again. Okay, read string. Now I'm going to actually step in, because this is not a default JavaScript function. So I'm going to step in. All right, read string. Okay, so this dot can read. I don't know what that is, so I'm just going to skip over it. This data, this cursor plus plus. All right, I don't know what that is. Okay. What are they doing here? So we see E set to 12. Cursor is at 47. We pass that in. I have no idea what it's doing here. So it's saying length equals 0. T equals 0. So this is a for loop while T less than E. So before it returns, I want to know, because I wonder if E is a length field. It's the first, if that is the first byte in the string, if it's giving us a length field, which will tell us how long the string is. So string.fromCarCode.apply. Okay, well, let's skip over this. It looks like an array of 12 long. So I'm going to step out of that, and then let's see if this dot name dot length. Whoops. 12. Okay, so the first byte is a length field, and then we know that we need to read that many bytes forward into the string. So the string here, we'll just make a note. First byte is length to read. Okay. All right. So I think this is enough for me to actually start coding. So what I'll do is, at this point, I think I have an idea of how this data is laid out. I'm going to leave my browser open, and I'm going to jump into my Python IDE, and we'll start writing some code.